Sometimes life takes us to places we never expected. Friendships made in youth can fade away under the cruel passage of time. But in some stories, fate steps in to rewrite unfinished friendships. It's 1972. One of the toughest periods of the Vietnam War was unfolding. Tom and Richard were two young soldiers serving together in the U.S. Army. In a land where death could knock at any moment, their greatest strength was the loyalty they shared. Tom was from Missouri, born into a farming family. He was quiet, introverted, but extremely trustworthy. Richard, on the other hand, grew up on the streets of New York and had seen life's tough side from a young age. He was talkative, witty, but equally brave. At first, they thought they came from completely different worlds. But amidst the chaos of war, they realized they needed to rely on each other. One night, while hiding in their trench, Richard turned to Tom and said, "If we make it out of here alive, promise me we'll meet every year. No matter what happens in life, this friendship will continue." Tom nodded sincerely. "I promise." But life doesn't always allow promises to be kept. When the war ended, Tom and Richard returned to their country, but they went in very different directions. Tom returned to his family's farm and started living a quiet life. The trauma from the war had closed him off. He preferred to keep away from people. Richard, meanwhile, went back to New York and began working in the insurance industry. While he wanted life to return to normal, a void within him never seemed to fill. The scars of war haunted him every night in his dreams. At first, they wrote letters, but as time passed, the hustle and bustle of life made those letters less frequent. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Tom wondered about Richard's life, but he couldn't find a reason to try to reconnect. Maybe he didn't want to look back. Richard felt the same. Despite wanting to search, he was afraid of the distance the years had created. "What if he's forgotten me?" he thought. And so, the years passed. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. In 2022, Richard's grandson, Alex, was rummaging through his grandfather's old belongings when he found a yellowed photograph. In the picture, two young soldiers were smiling together. On the back, there was a shaky handwritten note, "With my best friend Tom, 1972, Vietnam." When Alex showed this photo to his grandfather, Richard's eyes welled up. "Do you know, Alex? That man saved my life, but then I lost him." Alex, using modern technology, began an intense search through social media and military records. After days of research, he finally discovered that Tom was living in a small town in Missouri. Richard had received the news he'd been waiting for. His heart was racing, but now he wasn't sure if he had the courage to truly see him. Finally, Richard gathered his courage and decided to go to Missouri. When he arrived in Tom's town, he entered a cafe to see his old friend for the first time in decades. Tom had aged. His white hair and wrinkles spoke of the weight life had placed upon him. As he stirred his coffee, he suddenly heard a voice. "Hey, Tom, you look like you're waiting for someone." Tom froze. Slowly, he looked up and saw Richard. At first, he couldn't believe his eyes. But then, that moment arrived. The two old friends embraced for the first time in 50 years. "I made a promise, Tom, and I finally kept it," Richard said, his eyes full of tears. "It's never too late," Tom replied. And that day, despite the distance time had placed between them, they proved that true friendship never fades. From that day on, Tom and Richard decided to meet every year. They weren't young anymore, but that didn't matter. They took every opportunity to make up for the lost time. This story proves just how strong the bond of friendship can be, and that not even time can break it. Who knows? Maybe you too have a friend you lost years ago. Perhaps all it takes is a small step to find them again.